So, hello and welcome back to Call to Reform. In this episode, we have Krista talking to she is an intervention specialist at Mayfield High School. And we also have Zara speaking with who is a high school teacher at Talmadge High School. We also have some research articles to share about how much power teachers have in the reformation of school. So let's dive in.
First, we'll start with Krista's interview with Kayla.
Okay, and then I'm gonna say got it. Okay.
Hello, this is Krista Terabasi, and I'm here with one of the two teachers we'll be interviewing for today's episode of our podcast. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, Krista. My name is Kate. I am an intervention specialist, special ed teacher at Mayfield High School. So I mainly teach, I actually kind of have students in all grade levels, 9th through 12th grade, and I co-teach all different math classes at the high school level.
Oh, okay. Now, please tell me what school is like for you as a teenager.
Okay, so as a teenager, as an adolescent, I would say I really liked school. I was kind of always that student that enjoyed school, was worried about school, kind of wanted to learn, but also I feel like it was like a social thing during high school. I liked being with my friends. I liked being involved, playing volleyball, but I was on like student council, NHS. I just kind of liked the whole idea of school, and I always knew I wanted to be a teacher, so it makes sense that I kind of enjoyed school.
Yeah. Is there anything you would have changed about it?
Would have changed. I would say, yeah. So being at a public high school that I see how much they offer, I wish that when I was in high school, I took like a financial literacy or like a financial algebra class that just taught you about like real life application, because that was not offered. And then also just seeing like what being in a high school setting, and they offer programs for, it's called Excel Tech. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's basically like for students to get into their field that they're interested in. So like, if you wanted to be a teacher, you could join the program called Teach, and it's amazing. And they kind of like get you out into the workplace your junior and senior year. Like I look back at high school, I'm like, oh man, I wish I could do that because my high school didn't offer that. So that's probably just like one thing I would change. Overall, I liked the experience.
Yeah, I can kind of relate to that actually, because my school didn't offer that either, and I hear people talking about it. I'm like, dang, I wish I could have done that.
I know, or even like a kind of like a senior, like they do senior search, which like you get to shadow someone whose job you're interested in. So I would have loved to have been with a teacher for a few weeks and wrote about it. So that's just something I didn't do until college.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Who was your role model while you were in school?
Honestly, probably my mom, I have to say. She is not a teacher. She's actually like one of the only person in her family that isn't a teacher, because her sister's a teacher, her two brothers are teachers. It's just kind of funny. I know she would be an amazing teacher, but she kind of was just super motivating to me because she was just kind of like, she knew how much I love school. She kind of pushed me to like do what I want. I originally went to be an art teacher, and while I loved it, I did switch, but like she was just very helpful in that process. And just kind of really, I don't know, just kind of supported me through everything. Like, yes, I changed my major and, things like that, but I would have to say her.
Oh, that's sweet. How much do you know about how schools are funded?
Okay, so I know that we get funding from the state. I know sometimes it's federal funding, and then just also like funding from like property taxes, income taxes, but that's probably it with funding for me.
How did
Being
you
a teacher,
learn
I don't know a whole lot. I wish I knew a little more.
That's okay. How did you learn that?
I honestly feel like just learning that from like my, like towards the end of college, like learning how schools are funding and just kind of like the logistics of that. And then also just hearing from like our administration team and things like that. When we have professional development days, I feel like sometimes we get to talk about those things. But other times it's usually just the nitty gritty of like what we have to do and what we're teaching, so I feel like that's the main focus as a teacher. We don't worry so much about where the money's coming from, but sometimes we do hear from like people at our board office or administration, just some little things.
Just kind of like through the grapevine.
Yes, exactly. Yep.
How involved are families in helping decide what students should learn?
Okay, so I would say like helping decide what students should learn, like the decision of like, what they're going to learn in math, for example, because that's what I'm in, like not not really a whole lot, but I will say like families are involved in different ways. Like at Mayfield, like we have kind of different tracks for students. Like if students are struggling, they might be recommended for this class, but then they're told like what math class to take next. And like so families are always involved in those decisions, but I will say like we follow the Ohio State standards. So while we follow those standards, I feel like teachers do a really nice job, and I see this a lot with all of my different co-teachers. Like they bring like they bring real life application into the classes to make it interesting for the kids. Like sometimes I'm like, wow, I don't remember learning it like that. But I feel like we have to cater to kids now. I mean, it's 2021. So like there's different I don't know, like, kids are interested in different things and of course everyone benefits from real life and stuff. But I will say like we do get input from families and all that, but they're not so much determining or,
Deciding.
deciding. Yeah, exactly.
Mhm. Which makes sense.
Yeah.
How involved are students in deciding what students should learn?
So I will say like where I'm at in Mayfield, there is a big push, and I totally agree with it. It's called voice and choice. So like we really want students to have a voice in their learning, and then they've implemented things like this is just an example of how students kind of like determine what they're learning. But in math, we'll do things called choice boards, and it's like individual to the student. I help make them just being in different classes, and like it's not just like you're doing these 20 problems for math homework at night. It's like there's how I kind of set it up is like there's 9 boxes, and students, we let them like move around the room, work with partners on these sort of things. Some of them are like hands-on games. Some of them are like online. Some of that it might be an online game. Some of them might be like a Khan Academy sort of thing. But we kind of like to see like what the students like, and chances are they don't like the whole paper pencil, you're going to do 25 problems tonight. So like we'll say like, oh, do 2 boxes on your choice board, or we'll give them time during class. But we're trying to figure out different ways. So voice and choice is kind of big. So I do feel like students have a say in their learning, and I'm not a part of it, but I might be soon. I'm not sure. Mayfield also does like they have self-paced classes, but then they also have something called the option where like you kind of do it at your own pace. It's almost like, I almost feel like it really gets you ready for college. So they offer that at different grades. So I feel like students really get to decide like where they best learn.
Mhm. It sounds like the students, like, are more choosing, like, the
Yeah,
way they learn rather than what they learn,
exactly.
which I
Yeah.
feel
So
is a good balance.
exactly. Yeah. We still have to follow the content, but then if we give it to them in different ways, they kind of get to decide how to learn, like you said. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So, how involved are teachers in deciding what students should learn?
So teachers are really involved. I mean, yes, we follow the Ohio State standards. Like, for example, I'm in like algebra and geometry, and we do have to go off of that. But I feel like our school is like really flexible and like make it work for your class and your kids, like just based on the need. So like I've been in, this is my 7th year of teaching, and like it has changed so much. Like now we're like, oh, we'll make it different for this group of kids, or let's switch up the units, or just like kind of rearrange the curriculum. So they're really open to like what teachers feel is best. I feel like teachers do kind of have the most say in
Mhm.
that.
Yeah. How involved are community members, businesses, and community organizations in what students should learn?
So I don't know. So I don't really think they have too much of a say in like what they should learn. But I will say that like Mayfield is such like a strong like community that like I know there's like a lot of partnerships,
Yeah.
but not so much with like the learning, but in other things. Like being at the high school level, they a lot of the communities and like the businesses have partnerships with Mayfield High School with like job training experiences, and they're like really open to that. So I feel like they're more a part of of kind of like that aspect of learning, not so much deciding on what they learn. And I know our board members, like for our board of education, are very very involved, but I feel like they're very supportive of like the teachers and trust them that like that is their realm, whereas like they help with other things too.
Mm-hmm. And do you have any like specific examples of that?
Yeah, so like with the partnerships, I was thinking like with job training, just because I work with high school students, some of my students do like half day programs, half day programs with job training. So like what that might look like is they might work, well, with COVID, I know it's kind of been at a standstill, but like they might work in like a nursing home or like Hillcrest Hospital. Some of them work at like the Mayfield preschool, and then other jobs like they have a partnership with Jurgens, which is in Mayfield, that students can get like that job training experience half day. And then we have an intervention specialist, like a teacher on site that kind of helps them with different job skills. But I know that there are so many businesses like in our community that are totally willing to have high school students, like learn those basic employability skills.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
it's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah. To what extent has school changed for students today?
Just being in my seventh year of teaching, I would say it has changed a lot. From being a high schooler myself to doing like field experience, through my education program and whatever, I would say like I really do think that students have like a lot more choice. I do feel like teachers are trying to make it more engaging. It's not just the standard lecture. Like I really think we're seeing that like students, that's not the best way to learn, for most students. Some students, it works great. I know that my students need like hands-on activities. They need to get up and move. They like to work in groups, so I feel like a lot is changing, and student and teachers are just trying to like do the best they can. Like I even think about what my students read in English class. While I'm not in the English classes, they read like really interesting books now, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like you read like the old school books that were really hard to understand. So I feel like they're just trying to cater it and make it, I don't know, make learning more fun. So they're just trying to like get the students more engaged.
Yeah. And tell me about your ideal school.
Ideal school. So of course I'm keeping like co-teaching in mind, because that's my role in the classroom. I do have two classes by myself too, but I think like an ideal school would be, so I team teach with a lot of my colleagues, and I feel like students benefit, it doesn't matter. Like I do work with students with different learning needs, but like I feel like many students can benefit from two teachers in the classroom, just answering questions, going around the room. So I feel like co-teaching and just having a lot more of it would be like my ideal school. I mean, we do the best we can with the staff we have too, but like I feel that most classes could benefit from co-teaching. And then also just going off that like voice and choice, and kind of having students pick with like, their mode of learning and what they do. I think that would kind of play another part of it too.
Just before we get to the next question, can you explain exactly what a co-teaching classroom looks like?
For sure. Yeah. So I would say that co-teaching became popular. It was actually before I started. So I know that Mayfield implemented it before 7 years ago, but so basically my role in the classroom is I push into the classroom and I'm there the whole entire time. So it's not like going for a little bit and then I'm out. So like we're on block scheduling right now. I'm there for the whole 90 minutes. And for example, like my algebra class, I've been teaching with this teacher. This is our third year together. So I feel like we really have like that relationship of like, we plan together, we trust each other. A lot of the times it's like he's teaching the content and I'm buzzing around, or I'm teaching it and he's buzzing around during the mini lesson. And then when we break the kids up, whether it's group work, they're working on what I was talking about earlier, the choice board. We're both kind of helping, kind of managing a group. So it really is just like teaching together, and it's really, really helpful when like you already have that relationship. Luckily, I did know the content. Sometimes I am in a class where I'm like, oh boy, it's been a really long time since I've done geometry. But so luckily, like Mayfield does an awesome job of like kind of keeping you in a subject area, because I can actually be in any subject area where they would need me to co-teach. But like my area is math, so I'm just in math classes. But I feel like the kids they really like it because the more help they can get. And some of the kids don't even know like who is the content specialist, who is the special ed teacher. It's just like I
Yeah.
have two teachers, so it's a cool setting when it works for sure.
Is this like newer then? Like the idea of it in schools is like it's kind of newer.
I feel like it is. It kind of just wanting students with different learning needs, different special needs, like to be included in the general ed classroom. So
Mhm.
that's like a great way for them to do that. And if their ability level, if they could be successful in it. So in each of my classes, I do have different students on IEPs or even on 504 plans for different needs. And I just feel like their accommodations can be met with like more successfully with two people. So
Yeah. Yeah, like I don't think I've ever like even heard of co-teaching honestly, which is kind of
yeah,
embarrassing, but like
right. Because you
that
probably didn't see it
that's
at
really
yeah.
nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I think it works for a lot of kids. And sometimes there's still a need of an intervention class, a really
Mhm.
small group setting. It just kind of depends on the kid because it's just what they need.
Yeah, no, for sure. And what are the needs of your school community?
The needs, I would say, so I guess just kind of going off co-teaching, like I feel like sometimes, and this is probably in every school, like we need more, like we need maybe more co-taught classes, or we need more specific like intervention classes, or like we have these things called learning centers where I run mine, and it's students on IEPs, and I help them kind of with whatever they need. And while it's like so helpful and they get their work done, and we work on their specially designed instruction as well, it's hard to meet 13 students needs and with one intervention specialist. So like I'm just thinking like the needs are I'm just thinking like kind of more hands on deck the better. I mean, I'm sure in
Mhm.
any school setting.
Yeah.
But I do feel like Mayfield has like so much to offer with like our special programs for job training, for Excel tech, for all of that. So I do feel like they do offer a lot to our students.
Mhm. And how do schools meet the needs of those they serve?
So like just thinking of my kids with different needs on their IEPs, like I'm thinking like co-taught classes, special programs, um, like occupational therapy support, physical therapy support, meeting with their counselors, like things like that kind of come to mind. Just thinking about being in special education. That's kind of what I would say.
Yeah. And how do they know to what extent they are successful in meeting their needs?
I would say like looking at data, and like once again, I'm just kind of thinking about my kids that have their IEP goals. So we track their IEP goals every quarter, see how they're doing, and then of course track how they're doing in their classes. But just looking at the data, and not all of it is just tests. It's
Mhm.
checking in with their teachers, but I would say mainly probably like assessments. At Mayfield, we do like formatives, so like these don't count for a grade, but looking at formatives, looking at summatives, using all of that information, and just seeing if we're meeting their needs.
Yeah. And what is success in school?
So for this one, I think that like a lot of people think like, oh, student success is like an A or B or whatever, but like I'm thinking like more in depth kind of. And like I just I feel like students finding the way they learn, finding success like within themselves, feeling comfortable in the school setting, and like wanting to learn. Like to me, that's success. Like when students come in, want to learn, even if they struggle with something and they might not get it the first time, they might need to practice it like crazy. Because I see that with a lot of my kids, and that makes sense. They struggle in math. I'm helping them in math, but I more so think like success is like students wanting to learn, they find the right way they learn, being comfortable in the setting, and then even just like advocating for themselves. Like I like commend my students when they like can ask for help, because I know how hard it is. Like
Mhm.
that's like a big deal. So I feel like that's another part of success. And then of course, like getting a good grade in the class and getting their work done is another huge aspect, but I just don't necessarily think it's all based on tests. Because
Oh, yes,
I think
exactly.
that's a struggle. Everyone struggles with that.
Exactly. And how did you come to this understanding?
I would say just kind of being with kids of like all ability levels. Like, I being in a co-taught setting, it's yes, I have my kids that are on IEPs for different reasons, but then also being with some students in the general education. And I just feel like, seeing success, like, yes, a student who gets an A in the class because they aced all the tests, like that makes sense, but also like seeing students be successful in like different ways and just like kind of praising them for that, like that's such a big deal, even at the high school level, because they're about to be in the real world. Like they need to know about all these other things besides just, I can memorize this and ace the test. So just kind of having some experience there.
Yeah, just through watching and seeing.
Exactly.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today.
Sure.
All right.
Of course.
That's the end.
Thanks, Kristen. Seems to really care about a lot of her students and seems to really enjoy her job, which is really important for being a teacher.
I absolutely agree with you. This seems very involved with her students and wants them to succeed.
Definitely. So now let's hear what Zara have to say.
Well, hello.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am doing well. Thank you for asking.
Good.
I'm going to ask you a couple questions. Just answer as honestly as possible.
You got
no
it.
Pressure. Please tell me what school was like for you as an adolescent, and what would you have changed, if anything?
Okay. So, school for me was rather interesting. I remember when I was in 5th grade, and actually it was 4th grade. I transferred to Highland Elementary in Stowe from Redeemer Christian in Cuyahoga Falls. And I don't remember a whole lot about Redeemer, but I do remember when I first came to Highland, I struggled to fit in a little bit, right? And I didn't have a lot of friends. I started to make friends, but I remember this one glorious day where they pulled me aside and said, hey, you know what? You're doing really well in regards to math, and we're going to put you in the accelerated math class. And I thought, that is fantastic. 3 weeks later, they took me out of the accelerated math class and said, well, I think we made a little mistake. Yeah.
No.
And so I remember that moment being in the hallway, and I remember the feeling that I had at that point. And so then from that point on, to be honest with you, school itself was a struggle. It was very much a struggle. I had a mental block where I felt like I had a lot of a fixed mindset, right? There was no such thing as growth mindset back then, like we're aware of now. And I'm like, well, you're just not a student. You're not going to be a good student. And so, quite honestly, I struggled academically all through middle school. I struggled all through high school. And now in retrospect, and being of the age that I am, and you're kind of reflecting on your, earlier years, I know that it was because I felt inferior. So school, when I was younger, I didn't really like it that much. Always felt inferior, always kind of felt less than academically. Tried to offset that with athletics, so I got really, really into sports. But it was a little bit of a struggle. So
It's interesting to hear, because I never would have guessed that at all.
Yeah.
Just from knowing you.
Most people don't know that part of the story, and that's an exclusive for you. It's come out a little bit in some other interviews and things like that, but it was funny when my 20-year class reunion came around, and I went to high school, went to small high school, went to CBCA, and our class didn't have a lot, maybe 60 people graduating. And there was probably 30 people at the reunion, and I went in and we were going around the horn talking about what we're doing with our lives. Now, social media hadn't been really super popular, so you couldn't creep on somebody's Facebook page yet or anything.
Right.
And came to me and I said I was a teacher. You could hear some snickers and some chuckles, and I'm like, no, really, I'm a teacher. And as a matter of fact, I have my master's degree from Kent State in K-12 leadership. So not only am I a teacher, but I could be a principal, And just recently, one of my friends that I graduated high school with, I mentioned that on another interview on a podcast, and then he called Mrs. Whitman up and said, because he is now friends with her.
Yeah.
It's really funny. I graduated high school with him, but he and his new wife are kind of being mentored by Mr. and Mrs. Whitman.
Aww.
So he heard the interview, and then he called Sue, and he goes, you know your colleague Mark? I was one of those guys who laughed, you know.
Aww.
You know, yeah, they couldn't believe it, because I did. I struggled. I remember one semester having to run around and beg for extra credit. Got it from my band director just so I could be eligible for basketball, because if I didn't play basketball, my world would have came crashing down.
Yeah.
It really would have.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Huh. Who was your role model while you were in school?
So I was blessed to have quite a few role models, and it's interesting, again, you know, when you start to self-reflect and you look at the role that people played in your life. I would say that I had two coaches. My basketball coach, Greg McDivitt, he played a huge role, because not only was he my basketball coach, but he was also a teacher, and he was a mentor. Like, he would just sit down with me and just kind of pour like these leadership ideas and these expectations and qualities, and just kind of expose me to them. And now I find myself passing on the same things, you know, to my players and to my students. Ben Bellman, my soccer coach, played a huge role in my life. There were two teachers, Dr. Vandermeulen and Dr. Taylor, who really, when I look back at how they taught and the relationship that they had with their students, I remember sitting in their class and I'm like, if I were ever to be a teacher, which would never happen, you know, if I were ever to be a teacher, I want to be like those guys. Those are the guys I want to be like, because Dr. Vandermeulen would come flying in late to class every day, and he always wore a suit with a sock tie, and he'd come flying in and he'd start imitating Bart Simpson. And that's how we would start our econ class every day, and we'd roll, laugh, and you got to understand, at CBCA at that time, you didn't watch The Simpsons. I mean, it was risque, right? It was like you're pushing the boundaries with that, but here comes your teacher in, you know, talking like Bart Simpson, and it was just the coolest thing in the world. Or Beavis and Butthead, or whatever. Well, maybe it wasn't Beavis and Butthead. It was definitely The Simpsons. But they, those two guys, Dr. Taylor, just a dynamic teacher, dynamic person, always asking, you know, how I was doing, and you know what was going on in my life, and all of that. And there are quite a few more, but those are the ones that really just jump out at me.
Yeah, I love that. Wow. How much do you know about how schools are funded, and how do you learn this from what you know?
Well, I know that, you know, our tax dollars, our local tax dollars fund our schools, and you know they're heavily dependent on the levies, and there are multiple types of levies that you know you got to vote on in regards to, you know, operations or building levies and things of that nature. I learned about it honestly in my. You're always kind of aware of it, you know, and you're always like, well, I got to vote for levies because it's the right thing for me. To me, it's like the right thing to do. You know, I don't mind paying property taxes towards my schools because I know and believe in public education, and quite heavily. Do I know the intricate details of all of that? I don't. I'm kind of at that point in my life where I'm like, I got a good idea of what's going on. I'm not going to waste any more brain power on trying to understand any of that, because it's just out of my realm of understanding. But I learned a lot about it when I was getting my master's degree. You know, we studied school funding a bit when you're getting an administrative degree, and you're going to be a principal. You got to really be, you know, privy to what's going on. But that's about the basics. You know, that's the basis of my understanding. I know that it needs to be reformed. I know that there are inequality issues that have to be addressed, you know. But that's about the extent of it. And I didn't cheat. I didn't go and like study more. I'm just I'm shooting it straight.
No, I love it. I love that. It's amazing. How involved are families in helping decide what students should learn, or how involved do you think they should be?
This is a really good question when I saw it, and I think it's really interesting in light of all the controversies that are out there right now. I remember just recently, you know, we had a couple school board vacancies, you know, an election, and I remember looking at the infamous Talmadge talk and looking at people who were supposedly going to run for school board, and seeing some misconceptions out there where, well, we're going to write the proper curriculum, and we're going to write the way the classes should be ran and the lessons they should be learning and all of that, and get heavily involved in curriculum. And I thought, you know what, that's not the way it works, right? We're under the control of the state or the college board or whomever it may be, and whatever it is you're teaching, to follow those standards. So it's really difficult, in regards to what role does the role that the family plays, I think, is that they just kind of walk alongside the learner and they help them learn. And if it's something that maybe they might disagree with a bit, then they help the learner understand, different opinions, different thoughts, expose them to newer ideas. I mean, I know it's a really difficult question to answer if you're depending on the age of the student that you're dealing with. But right now I'm thinking from a high school perspective, and my son's in high school, my daughter just graduated. And it's like, I can remember there were times where there were books maybe being read that I didn't like, or maybe there was content being discussed that I wasn't, that maybe didn't align with my, my morals or values. But saying, okay, Kelsey, okay, Noah, let's talk about this, and let's kind of figure, you've got to figure these things out on your own, and let's talk about the best method, and let's talk about how can you learn. Okay, you're getting one perspective. Let's talk about an avenue of to get a different perspective. Does that make sense?
No, that definitely makes sense. That's awesome, by the way. How involved are students in deciding what they should learn, or how involved should you think they should be?
I'm lucky to be teaching psychology, right? I don't have a state mandated test in regards to that. So one of the things I really like to do in that class is get a lot of student feedback on what they want to learn, and just kind of modify the class according to that. And so it's really, I think it's such an important component. I really think there has to be student buy-in, and there's got to be student ownership. And so it's, in that type of a class, it's easy. In a lot of our other, classrooms, it's difficult to give up that kind of control. But you kind of have to, One of the things I've been doing a lot more often in my classes is the grid method, right? Where it's based on Webb's depth of knowledge, and it's like mastery learning, but it gives freedom of choice. Like there's a subject that we got to learn, and at the end there's going to be a test, some sort of an assessment. But getting from A to Z looks different depending on the student. Like they can choose, okay, I'm going to watch a video, or maybe I'm going to write a poem, or maybe I'm going to find an article and study it, or maybe I'm going to, listen to a podcast. But it kind of gives them some freedom of choice to take some ownership of their learning.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? In an ideal world, and I don't mean to jump to one of your other questions, but in an ideal world, there could be some methodology that's very similar to homeschooling, which is, okay, we're going to take this subject right now and we're just going to study it. We're going to exhaust it. We'll study from every aspect. So we'll look at, if it's American history, we'll look at the election of 1912, or just presidential elections in general, and maybe we'll go visit the McKinley Museum, right, and study William McKinley's election and what happened when Teddy Roosevelt took over, and then maybe go visit other houses in Ohio of different presidents,
Yeah.
And it just, and then try to cater math around it and science. Just really kind of get into it in an exhaustive manner, but we can't do that. You're on a timetable and you're bound to these tests and assessments, and so it's really tough giving up that kind of control.
How involved are teachers in deciding what students should learn, or how involved do you think that they should be?
So I think that varies district to district. We are blessed here in Talmadge to have a lot of control over what we do. Like our administrators, and even our administrators, and then superintendent, curriculum director, they're all very trusting and kind of hands off. if you are doing it the way you should, you're teaching and you're getting good results, they kind of allow you to go within the proper parameters, right? The direction that you want to go. So, like the grid method, it would be very easy for an administrator to say, no. We don't want you doing it. Everybody does it this way. Boom, 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 kind of in a cookie cutter way. But no, they've been completely supportive. They're like, just do what you want to do, test things, challenge things, experiment with best practices so that you can help every learner.
Yeah.
But some districts aren't that way. Some are very rigid. There's some that are really close to here that are like, okay, you're going to do things this way, A, B, and C. And if you're teaching American history and I'm teaching American history, we are on the same pace. We are given the same assessments. We're given the same assignments. Everybody, and there's a time and a place for that. But that's pretty rigid.
Yeah.
And in our case, that doesn't exist. It's within reason. If you do something that's, not right, they're going to get on you. Don't misunderstand me. But they're trusting, right? They're like, you're professionals. If you want to try something new, if you want to experiment with something and teach it in a different way, or even reverse the order of the curriculum or whatever, as long as the results are adding up at the end, they're fine with it.
Yeah. I like that. That's nice to know. I never really thought about that, obviously, from a student perspective, but I don't know. It's kind of cool seeing behind the curtain a bit.
Yeah.
How involved are community members and businesses and kind of organizations around Talmadge in what students should be learning, or how involved do you think they should be?
Well, okay, so from the curriculum aspect of it, kind of flying by the seat of my pants here with this, but I guess I would say that the community is involved in the fact that they are community members, are members of the school board. They've been elected for that position, and then they are helping make final decisions about certain textbooks or extracurricular books and materials that are being used. So I think that there's a little bit of involvement, but there's a lot of involvement from that perspective. But then community members don't really have much of a say in. So I was having this discussion not long ago because there's some misconceptions out there now about what's being taught in the schools, because there are some hot topic issues that are they're in the news, they're polarizing, and they're very partisan, right? And the conversation I had recently was, well, I sat down at a table and one person asked me, well, you're a history teacher, so this stuff must be being taught in your class. And I'm like, well, no, not really. We address these historical issues from a historical perspective, but there's no hidden agenda. The College Board for AP class has laid out the key concepts. You're following the concepts and you're teaching them, and that's that. There isn't a special entity out here that's rewriting curriculum for us.
Yeah.
Now I know that there's pressure out there for different types of curriculum, and there'll be lobbying, out there, but immediately no. It's now there's another aspect of this question too. I was thinking about too in regards to involvement with the community. A lot of our classes will bring community members in to speak and to share. So from that perspective, they're contributing to our students' education, right? In psychology, try to bring in people in Talmadge who are in the psychology field. I just found out one of my basketball players, his dad's a history teacher, so a history professor. I'm gonna try to get him to come in and just talk to my kids about his area, specialty. And so from that perspective, community members come in and influence. But in regards to the curriculum, other than adding to it in that fashion, they're not influencing it, heavily. And quite honestly, there just isn't time during the day to listen to anybody outside the classroom. It's fast,
No, I believe it. To what extent has school changed for students today compared to when you were back in school?
So much better.
Makes me happy.
Yeah, I really do think that we have an awareness now that people are different, and we appreciate and value differences. I think that no school is perfect. no school's perfect, no time period is perfect, but I do feel like now we have grown so that more kids feel safe and more kids feel loved and valued. And I think that when I was in school, it wasn't that way. When I was in school, it was everybody learned the same way, and if you were different than that, I mean, you just had to do it. It was direct instruction. You had to take notes. You had to study. You had to take a test. Right? There were no accommodations. There was just no understanding of the way the brain works. There was no just constantly trying to better yourself. There wasn't even an encouragement to do that. I was blessed to have a lot of good teachers, a lot of really good teachers, and they loved what they did and they were very passionate about what they did. But everybody was the same way. Now it's so different. Again, things like the grid method and other methods that are in class that other teachers are using allow us to differentiate and kind of meet the student where they're at and meet that need. So it's a beautiful time to be a teacher, and plus I think my mind is kind of drifting this way, but I remember when I had you in class, I remember sitting there just thinking of everything that I could learn from you. I learned empathy and compassion, and just this mindset that you had where you were judgment free, and you taught me that, and so I think we're in a spot where we know that it's okay to not know everything, and it's okay to learn from our students. You don't have to be the sage on the stage, right?
Right.
You want to be that guide on the side, and so.
Well, thank you. That means a lot to me. That means a lot. Tell me about your ideal school.
My ideal school. Well, my ideal school would be named Teddy Roosevelt, or
of course. Not surprised.
No, my ideal school would be one where there was a tremendous amount of joy, a lot of music, and a lot of movement. I think of the Ron Clark Academy. I don't know if you've ever heard of Ron Clark.
I've heard of it, yes.
You need to Google him, follow him on Instagram. You really should.
Okay.
It's like they have a period of every day where they all meet out in the hallway and everybody dances and they make TikToks together, and they sing songs based on the curriculum, and a lot of movement, a lot of celebrating kids, just creating an environment where kids want to go to school and they want to learn. I would want the best technology, but I don't want to be all technology. I want to draw things and write things and use paper and pencil, and lots of small group activity, a lot of stuff that we do in my class on a much larger scale, with a heavy emphasis on SEL, social and emotional learning, especially
yes.
now.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
It sounds lovely. That sounds lovely.
Well, maybe I'll start. You'll come teach with me?
I would. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yes. Seriously, I would. Just saying. What are the needs of your school community?
So when you say school community, are you referring to students or staff?
I am referring to, I would say Talmadge kind of as a whole, where you teach, whether, that could be staff, that could be students, whatever you think.
Well, I think so many of our staff members, especially now, if you would ask me this question 2 years ago, it'd be very different. But I think now, one of the needs is that teachers need assurance that it's okay to not be okay, that it's a tough time, and that a parent or guardian gives the teacher the benefit of the doubt and understands that they're doing the best that they can. Certainly want every person advocating loudly and boldly for their own child, but some grace and understanding extended towards the teacher, and it needs to be reciprocated. The teacher needs to do the same thing, right?
Oh.
If you were to kind of compare and contrast me now to 2, 3, 4 years ago, I turned into a big softie. So.
Oh.
But I think the school community just needs to be assured of that. Kind of struggling with how to put words to it, but I think it's just the community, it would be nice to have confidence, to know that people have confidence in us, and support us. And we do to a degree. But I think sometimes people lose sight of the fact that teachers are human as well, and educators are human, right?
Yes.
Which is the mission behind Between Two Blutos.
Amazing podcast. I listen. How do they know what extent they are successful in meeting the needs of the school? And by they, I mean kind of more so administration, if you can. How does that administration kind of help reassure you guys?
That we're meeting the needs?
Yes.
So I think, leadership is a funny thing right now, and I think it's important to understand, like, even administrators are struggling immensely.
Yeah.
A lot of people feel like they have a target on their back right now, and because there's just so much going on with COVID and recovering from all this, recovering from something that you're not out of yet, but I think our administrators, they still continue to display trust in us and give us kind of free reign of the classroom as far as what we want to do. They're, our administrators, the high school, are very supportive of that. They're very accommodating, like a different methodology, and their house is always telling us, you guys are doing great, you're doing great, you're doing great. I have other friends who are administrators, all across the nation, and one of the things, every one of them do things a little bit differently. So some of them are, always providing meals for their staff as a thank you, like once a month, just little things to just let them know that they're appreciated, they're valued, they're seen, and they're heard, and those things go a long way. So.
Love that. What, in your opinion, is success in school, and how did you come up with this understanding?
So, it wasn't always this way. When I first started teaching, and this is kind of like what happens when you're a teacher and when you're a coach. One of the big mistakes rookies make, and sometimes it carries over longer than your rookie stage, is that you kind of teach or coach the way that you were taught or coached, right? And you quickly find out that doesn't work, that you have to change with the times. You have to stay up to par. In this profession, you don't have time, nor should you take the time to just become complacent and comfortable. You can't do that, right? You got to spend time getting to know the kids, understanding where they're from, and figuring out the best way to relate to them and to reach them, and then help them understand that they can't measure themselves by a score, right? So it's really interesting because this has been a big issue recently over the past couple of years, especially with advanced placement, right? And it's trying to get students to understand that you are more than a score, that success comes in many different ways, and that you may not get the grade that you want, but that doesn't mean you're going to be that the outcome was less successful, right? So you were challenged, you were pushed, you were stretched, and you had to study harder than you've ever studied, or you had to do things differently. Okay, you didn't get the grade that you wanted, but does that necessarily mean you're a bad student? No, it means that you're refining yourself and you're becoming the best version of yourself, right? Yeah. And that's what it's about. And I'm dealing in that. I've got my son in my class right now, and he's frustrated. And we're working through those frustrations. I've got a lot of other students who are coming in, and they're just like, and especially now after a year and a half off, trying to find that healthy balance of rigor versus compassion and empathy, right? But just getting them to understand that you're going to be okay if you get a less than 100%. You're going to be just fine. And you're going to look back, and it's not the grade that you're going to remember, and it's not the test you're going to remember, but it's the things that stretched you and challenged you and how you dealt with it here. And I've had some conversations with, people recently where it's like, okay, I know you might want to drop AP at semester break, but wouldn't you rather your son or daughter be challenged in here, knowing that I'm their loudest advocate and I'm going to walk side by side with them? Or would you want them to be comfortable moving through, get those really good grades, but then face controversy outside the school and not know how to handle it, or not have ever been exposed to anything that would be challenging, you know?
Yes.
So just getting people to understand that success is measured, it shouldn't be measured by a grade point average. It should be measured by, your personal individual growth and how you continue to become the best version of yourself.
Yeah.
I'm not saying just completely throw out the grades, although there's a big movement in education to go gradeless. And I've been studying it and looking into it, and it's very interesting. But just helping kids understand that failure is okay. And I'm not talking like F's, F's are okay too, as long as you're doing your best, right?
Yeah, right.
But if you get a less than that you're not accustomed to, it's okay, because it's about the process.
I needed to hear that. Wow.
Trust the process.
Yeah. What role would you like to play in making schools places where all children can be successful?
Well, you know what? The role that I feel like I'm playing right now, and I don't know if this is going to be my role. I was telling my basketball kids today, because we're in the middle of a book study, and the book study is asking my little 8th graders to think about a short-term and a long-term goal. Like, what's your goal for the season, for the season, but then what's your goal for the year and for 5 years? And I'm like, guys, I'm doing this with you as well. Just because I'm almost 50 and I've been teaching for 20 some odd years doesn't mean I don't have dreams and aspirations. There are places I want to go, people I want to meet, things I want to do, right? But, for my time right now, I think that given the opportunities that I have, I just want to talk about, I just want to share those types of things. I just want to influence kids. My classroom and other classrooms, I just want to establish relationships, and I just want to inspire people, and help them pursue the best versions of themselves. And recently I gave a talk at the NHS ceremony, and we called it the 4 Ws, the 4 Ws. And it's kind of been talking to a mentor of mine. He lives in Texas, and we've been talking about how that's kind of a great platform to kind of hold on to. And I'm blessed. I'll be actually speaking in a podcast. I'll be interviewed on Sunday night for a podcast, and it's called The Big Ed Idea. And my buddy Ryan runs it. It's a really nice, really good podcast, but he's like, well, what's your big idea? Very similar. What's your big idea? And it really is the 4 W's. I want to talk to kids about, what are you feeding your mind, right? What are you feeding your mind? And the second one is, what's your foundation? What is your foundation? Is your foundation, is it unstable because it's all about your grades and it's all about your status, or is it about who you really are and the value you bring to this world? And what are you feeding your mind as far as what are you listening to, what are you reading, how are you trying to become the best version? And then who are you serving, right? Who are you serving, and then who are you leading? And so just talking about those within the classroom, the what, the who, the 4 Ws, and using education as an opportunity to do that, and that's, you can use history, you can use you can use any content to teach those things, right? We're studying history, fantastic. Let's study history. So, but let's talk about these guys. What did they feed their mind that led them to be good or bad leaders? What was their foundation? Were they driven by purpose, or were they driven by greed, right? Were they servant leaders, or were they people who were just, it was all about them, and it was all, what can we do about myself? And then who were they impacting? Who were they leading? Did they have that kind of an influence? And, so it's kind of where I'm at right now, just developing that, thinking about it, and of course going to keep working on the podcast.
That's amazing. Amazing. Great answers. How does your understanding of success compare to the way the state understands success?
Oh, they're 2 different things. They're 2 different things. And I think we have had moments where we've taken strides in the right direction, but then I think that then oftentimes we revert back to the old way of thinking where we want to measure kids. And this is a difficult question for me to answer because, again, like school funding, I mean, I know the generalities, but my biggest concern is the AP test, right?
Right.
And so I really pour all my knowledge and understanding into that and holding my kids accountable to that and prepping them for that. And so from that perspective, I think, the AP test, that standardized test is challenging, and it does hold kids to a higher standard. But these end of course exams and these different standardized tests that kids have to take, I think they measure the wrong things. And I think they need to be reformed. So I don't think my definition of success is the same.
I had a feeling it wasn't. I had a quick feeling. And last question, how are you or your school handling the current issues with COVID in your position, and how you do feel that?
Man, it's a tough situation. It's a tough situation because you don't want to live your life in fear, but then you don't want to live your life irresponsibly, right? And so I do my part, right? I do my part. Well, let me just hit pause on that and just say, I think our school has been really the gold standard when it comes to being prepared and making people feel safe. There's some controversy now because they got rid of the mask mandate, and but I think it's we try to keep everything clean. We try to keep kids separated. We try to do things the best we can, but the most important thing has been getting the kids back in school. They have to be in school. And so I think our school in general has done a wonderful job just, changing things and modifying things as the Ohio Health Department and the Summit County Health Department has issued different stances and different policies. But, it is tough. It's tough. I mean, there are times like where I'll be there and I don't have my mask on and I'm feeling like, am I making the kids scared because I don't have my mask on?
Yeah.
And it's, or am I exposing myself to something that I don't want to be exposed to? At the end of the day, you just kind of block that stuff out and you just do your best to,
right.
Provide a safe environment for your kids and teach.
Well, thank you so much for
welcome.
sitting here and answering these questions.
You're welcome. My
You're the
pleasure.
best.
Thanks, and Zara. Seems to be a really down-to-earth teacher who seems to genuinely care for his students. Thank you to both interviewees for taking the time to meet with Krista and Zara.
Both teachers seem to really be invested in their professions, but also in their professions, also with their students. And I feel like that's a big thing in schooling, that we need more teachers throughout the country and even the world to just take notice and stand up for their students.
I absolutely agree with you. With teachers standing up for their students, it's going to push the kids harder to do their best and feel like they have someone to go to and be there for them.
For sure. So we also have some research from two different stories. The first one is from the Education Research Institution, and one part of the article we all sort of agreed was the best point was when the author Chung-Il Yoon from the Korea National University said, to perform their, meaning teachers, role successfully, they should treat every student differently, which means responding differently to different situations. And I personally feel that this is something schools in the U.S., but also in generally the world, need to take more steps in this direction and take this more seriously. Not just necessarily go based on a set curriculum like in the U.S., the Common Core, but because that doesn't really work for every student.
Yes, definitely. Every child learns in a different way and have the right tools for what will help them succeed, because some children, their way of learning can be different than others. We also have another article from the Principle of Collegeship. In the article, they state, our first step toward tomorrow must ensure realistic empowerment of all professionals within our schools. unless we are willing to take the risk and to make this move into an unknown future. I feel that this excerpt really would do well into schools, because the only way for this stuff to actually work and for kids to actually have like new is by like teachers using their opinions and voice and by pushing their students.
I completely agree with you, Marissa. And there's definitely some common trends we've seen through these interviews and the articles. Like, teachers have definitely gotten more involved with the students over the years and more charismatic towards their students, which is good, and it helps really build that relationship that teachers are really someone you can go to.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the common seems to be that teachers are trying to meet of the districts, their supervisors, and the students all at once. So it's making it like difficult because they need to meet like everything for all those people.
For sure. There definitely needs to be more breathing room, per se, for teachers in their professions.
Yeah, absolutely. Because with, like you said, more breathing room, it would make it easier for them to be able to get what's done.
Definitely.
Well, that's all we have time for on this episode of Call to Reform. We hope you enjoyed.
Thank you for listening.